Dear guests of the Hamburg Society Conference, fellow activists, distinguished panel speakers in the front row. I'm delighted to welcome you today's future talk on youth empowerment in global sustainability. Our goal is to simply amplify young voices, and it's important to emphasize that today's panel was created entirely by young people on a voluntary basis. It's not just the two of us standing here today, but a team of around 20 young activists who have invested hundreds of hours over the last half year to bring this future panel to life. Their efforts are a testament to their dedication, ensuring that voices of hundreds of young people around the world are heard, and the contributions included throughout the entire co-creation process. Please join me in another round of applause to recognize the commitment of the entire team here in the front row. As you can imagine, condensing such a significant amount of work in just 45 minutes is quite a challenge. Therefore, we will be conducting a digital Q&A session today. Please feel free to... Oh, there's the presenter, I'm sorry. Feel free to use the QR code. We're going to answer your questions on social media. And especially also our work, the entire team will be involved in that. Well, for those who don't know us, I'm Jan Christian Menden. I've been involved in political activism and civil engagement for over 10 years with experience ranging from advocacy work with One Campaign, political campaigning, but also think tank, model UNs and other student initiatives. Most prominently, I serve as also 20 others here as the advocate for young voices and as a youth ambassador for One Campaign, which is a network which fights extreme poverty and preventable disease, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa, with the SDGs as our framework for action. As I'm not the only one on stage today, I'm delighted to introduce you to my co-host.
My name is Areej Alsayed, and I'm a member of the Youth Advisory Council to the Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development of Germany, also known as BMZ.
We will also welcome Catherine Russell for the opening remarks of our panel.
Thank you so much. It's always great and challenging to follow young people. So very excited to see both Jan and Areej. And we got to meet earlier and hear the remarkable work they're doing. And I'm just very grateful for that and so happy to see you here. I'd also like to thank the other panelists and the youth delegates. There are a lot of young people around the halls here, not as many as we want. Next year maybe we'll have more, but so delighted to see you also. Thank you for that. I'm just gonna make a couple of very, very brief remarks. At this point in time, there are about 1.8 billion young people in the world today. It's a big number. It's a huge and influential force if we can get them to come together, be educated, and to really advocate for the things that they care about. Global sustainability can only be achieved with their active involvement. I travel all around the world all the time, and I get to see many great things in the world, but I also see the devastating impacts of climate change. And I think this is especially true in very vulnerable communities. But I have seen how dedicated children and young people are making a real difference through climate action, and it does give me a lot of hope for the future. I was in the Pacific I don't remember when, because that's all I do is travel, I think in August, September, maybe July, anyway. And I don't know how many of you have been there, but it is at the same time one of the most beautiful places in the world, but also one of the places that's most at risk. And you can feel that. It's very present, the dangers of climate. But there were some youth climate actors there who were amazing, and young people. They were instrumental in getting the United Nations General Assembly to request a judgment from the International Court of Justice on the obligations of rich countries to address climate change. I thought that was pretty amazing, actually, for young people to think about using the courts that way and to do that. And I think their efforts are really an example of the positive impact children and young people can make when they have a seat at the table, which is really the critical question. And I think, I want to thank BMZ, I think this idea of having young people here, giving them a seat at the table is really key. I think many countries see the importance of young people. We see it more and more, and they're taking steps to promote their agency. In Argentina, just as an example, the National Secretariat for Children, Youth, and Family established the National Program for the Right of Children to ensure that children and youth can exercise their right to citizen participation. Again, when the government recognizes the importance of it, acknowledges it, and takes steps to make sure young people have a voice, it really makes all the difference. But, of course, unfortunately, in too many places, children and young people are denied their rights to participation. Countries like Afghanistan, which is probably the most extreme in this situation, girls and women face appalling limitations on their rights. And girls, of course, are being shut out of public life, and their right of education is being denied. The most extreme and most horrifying situation in that regard. In other countries, we hear accounts about child right defenders and child climate activists who face growing repression. And I think we see that because their voices are so powerful. And I think it's another reason that we all have to push hard for their participation. It is our responsibility to protect youth advocates, to make sure that they have a seat at the table and that their inputs and recommendations are taken seriously into consideration by decision makers. It can't just be an afterthought. And when we work together, lasting positive change in this regard is really possible. For example, in India's Maharashtra state, UNICEF and youth climate leaders work to roll out climate education to 65,000 schools. I mean, that's a big number. And I think it's a good example of how we can do it when we push together. Another great example is the Climate Hub for Children, which is a partnership with the German Development Ministry that supports 52 young leaders from Eastern and Southern Africa with negotiation skills and training to join their delegations at the Africa Summit and at the COP. And I do think this is an important piece of this effort, which is to make sure that young people have the education and the training they need so that when they get a seat at the table, when they can use their voices, they're prepared to do it. Children and young people see what's happening around them. They're worried about the future of the planet, and they are very, very impatient for adults to do better. They are and can be tremendously powerful advocates. It's now my honor to invite UNICEF's youth delegates to stand up. They are the experts, the community leaders, the frontline responders, and they represent the change we all hope for. So please, everyone, stand. Great. Excellent. Excellent, great. And with that, I turn it back to you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine, for your inspiring word. I think what I want also to highlight from your speech, you said young people are denied their right to participation. And here I want also that all people acknowledge that participation is a right and it's not like it's must to have and not like good to have, like we see and experience in different political spaces. So, and I want also to say that I'm so glad to see a lot of young people here, but also especially grateful that a lot of non-youth are here also listening to our session. And now I would like to invite our speakers for today and invite them to join us on the stage. Welcome, Achim Steiner, Alicia, Bärbel Kofler, Smidt. Merci.
I'm coming to the non-Jews.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. And we will start with a quick round of introduction of our speeches. And I will start with Mr. Achim Steiner. Achim Steiner has been the administrator of the United Nations Development Program since June 2017. And he is also the vice chair of the United Nations Sustainable Development Group and also the chair of the Hamburg Sustainability Conference.
We are also quite glad that Frau Dr. Bärbel Kofler from the BMZ, one of the other hosting organizations, is also joining us today. Yeah, she is a parliamentary state secretary to the Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development. Before that, she was the Federal Government Commissioner for Human Rights and Human Aid for 6 years. And she also has been a member of the German Bundestag or Federal Parliament for over 2 decades.
That's the non-long.
Thank you so much for being here. And now I want to introduce Alicia Amancio. She is the founder and director of the Latin American Youth Climate Scholarship. This is an initiative that supports Black and Indigenous youth in participating in international climate discussions. Alicia's work also emphasizes empowering young people to effectively tackle climate struggles and challenges and directly engage with and influence global climate negotiation. Glad to have you here.
Thank you.
As a member of the One family, it's a special pleasure for me to also introduce to you Mercy Mutana. Mercy is a Pan-African youth champion from One Campaign from Kenya, and she advocates for youth development through representation and grassroots civic engagement. With a background in commerce, she is especially well-rounded in bridging youth program and project management.
And now I have the honor to introduce Dr. Nina Smidt. She has been the managing director and spokesperson for the Siemens Foundation or the Siemens Stiftung since 2020 and leading initiatives in education, arts, culture, but also communications. And she previously directed that site US Foundation in New York. Glad to have you here also, Nina.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Let's dig into the results. We have no, we do not have technical issues. Well, when we started half a year ago, we said, how can young and diverse perspectives shape sustainable development strategies and promote intergenerational justice in policymaking? Well, to help answer this, we conducted a quite extensive survey to understand the priorities and concern of young people, bringing voices from across the globe with you in the audience together. Let's take a quick look at our key results. From our participants, our respondents came from 6 continents, with an absolute majority from the global south, particularly, that's what I'm quite proud as a one activist, from Africa, followed by Europe. They are young, passionate, and deeply engaged. Nearly 90% are under the age of 30. And in their communities, they are the leaders with a clear vision for the future. Talking of that, the entire 30-page evaluation is also available online for anyone who wants to dive deeper into the data. Yeah, let's dive right in. Our survey revealed that young people are most concerned with promoting environmental protection, education, and also ensuring the participation in the decision-making process when it comes to the achieving of the SDGs. These areas reflect where they see the most urgent needs for actions. They also pointed out significant barriers to their involvement, including a lack of financial support, limited access to networks, and not being sufficiently included in political decisions. These challenges make it harder for the youth to contribute meaningful, even though they are eager to drive progress on sustainability.
Okay, and we will, I will change to the next slide. Yeah, technical issues again. This is the one. Okay, we are here. So in our survey, we asked the young people, what are the biggest challenges of youth participation? And we received more than 600 comments from the 380 participants. About 1/3, like you see, about 1/3 of these comments highlighted the lack of representation and meaningful youth participation in policy-making processes. So beyond simply reviewing the comment, we as co-creation team analyzed them to understand also the interactions and also the connections between these challenges. For example, the lack of representation, like the 1/3, is due to limited resource, limited knowledge on how to engage, but also the lack of financial support, and also the absence of quality education, awareness, and empowerment. So you can see like this interaction here due to other challenges that young people address in our survey, and you can see the interactions between them. They are not just isolated issues, but they are more structural challenges that are deeply interconnected. So we want to highlight that invest in meaningful youth participation is invest and not like waste of money, is invest in the future. So invest in meaningful youth participation is essential to enhance the quality of youth and youth representation and also youth engagement. And these efforts have to be expanded at every level. So now we will have the time to ask our speakers about these results and focusing on the key results. And we will start with Dr. Bärbel Kofler. Let's turn our attention to Bärbel. So Bärbel, the consultation has shown that the most of the youth calling for increased participation at every level, also in political decision-making processes. So from your perspective as a development policymaker, why is so important to promote youth participation and making it also more meaningful? It's not like, we have good image because we have youth, but include us at every level and always in all the processes of BMZ, but also in other decision-making processes.
Well, thank you first of all for having us here, the non-youngs. I like that. I have to keep that in my mind. I like that description. Well, thank you for presenting also the results of your work here and of your survey, because at the end of the day, it's also part of the answer, because there are really meaningful insights. What are the topics, the most urgent topics for the young generation? So I see two things, if I summarize that a little bit. One thing was climate change, obviously, everything connected with the transformation we all have to undergo there, and that makes something with our everyday life. And there's a big society discussion going on transformation and how it should look like. And I think the youth should have a say in that, and you're presenting that. And the second point was the overall inequality at the end of the day, if it's coming to personal things like having the right of a good education, having the chance to find a good, reasonable job or decent work, but also having a say in political decision making. And I think this outcome is also very valuable because it's including all continents. And that's not so often that we have things like that. You're always telling me at the Youth Council in the BMZ, it has to be meaningful participation, not only sitting somewhere in a nice conference room and be also there and we are proud that you are there or something like that, but really have a say in decision making. And those results, those surveys are giving us also the idea in which direction that could go. It was mentioned we are trying to support young people in with getting trainings on negotiation skills to be really meaningful partners. We are trying to include youth delegates in our delegation, not only in being there, but also having the right to speech, and not only in a sidekick or whatever, but really in a plenary session where you have then the people you wanted to address. So to be really meaningful, and that's a learning process. And for that learning process, I think we need you also, sometimes also to kick us a little bit. But I really want to show you we are willing to learn.
Thank you so much.
And yeah, thanks for organizing all that. I really want to say that you're saying that it was done voluntarily. Thanks for organizing it.
Thank you so much. And like, I'm from the BMZ Youth Advisory Council, so we always say we are the critical voice in the ministry. So thank you for ensuring that we are like, our critical voices are, being heard in the ministry. And I hope like the youth participation, not just in the ministry in Germany, but also in all globally, gets improved, and also with the offer of BMZ.
Maybe a last sentence, because I cannot go too much into details in this first round, but it is very important as a part of our feminist development policy. That means at the end of the day having an inclusive development policy to various different people, doesn't matter which background, and of course youth participation is part of that, so we have to include young people in our designing of our projects, for example. What are their needs? What are their ideas? And that's something, that's also a process, but that's something we are trying to do, and we are on the way on that also.
Thanks, Bärbel. We're going to discuss it further in the second round. Not to mercy. Well, as an African grassroots activist, you present the continent that is especially impacted by climate change, and our survey results were quite clear with highlighting this urgent call from youth from all over the globe. So regarding that, there is also the significant need for increased financial support for youth-led projects, and I mean that's your specialty. So it would be quite interesting to listen to your thoughtful remarks regarding that.
Thank you. Good morning to everyone. And first and foremost, as a member of One Campaign, I would like to ascertain that indeed the results of the survey reflect the voice of Africa and even sub-Saharan Africa. Climate change is definitely a top priority because it is cross-cutting. It is going to affect health. For example, when we had the floods, right after, of course, waterborne diseases outbreak is possible. When it comes to vulnerability of those displaced, then you'll have gender issues and vulnerability to SGBV. So thank you very much for collecting the voices of young people. And when it comes to financing, which is something we are keen on as One Campaign, youth financing is important because it's killing two birds with one stone. So where I come from in sub-Saharan Africa, we have an unemployment issue. For young people, you'll find that as a country, we do have an unemployment rate of maybe 14%. But when it comes to young people, it's 1 in 3 young people that are unemployed. And this is without even factoring the underemployed or those without decent jobs. So financing youth projects then enables tackling climate change, but then also especially when it comes to green financing and green investment. And as we expand the green economy, as we support something like agriculture, because majority of African countries, the top GDP contributor is agriculture. My country, at least 60% is from agriculture, and it then supports the second top industry, which is service industry. So commerce, finance services, all that is going to support agriculture. So when you have climate financing that ensures resilient agriculture, when you have financing for green jobs, things like clean energy, the potential to create millions of jobs in Africa is there because we have not yet adapted so much. At least Kenya is leading because 90% plus of our energy comes from renewables, but for the rest of the continent, there's so much potential in wind, in solar, in green hydrogen, which is being explored in my country and even nearby Tanzania and many other countries. So financing is the place of action, actually, because after the paperwork, because even in my own country, we have a national climate action and adaptation policy, which has been supported. The youth engagement was supported by GIZ. So after the policy work and you have the plans, it's the financing that then is going to be able to enable action through projects, programming, and development action.
Thanks.
Thank you so much, Mercy. Now let's hear from Nina. So access to networks and mentors come up very often in the survey. So we as youth believe this is something where the philanthropic organization like Siemens Foundation can play an important role. So to what extent do you agree, and also the Siemens Foundation, on that? And is the Siemens Foundation offering programs in this context?
Absolutely. I strongly believe that networks, strong networks and partnership where we actually co-construct and find solutions to some of the main challenges, such as climate change, but also dealing basically with economic perspectives, for example. There we actually see that it is so important to build strong partnerships and to work together in strong partnerships. And we at the Siemens Foundation, we actually work in 3 areas: climate and sustainability, digitality and connected societies, and the 3rd area is access to essential services. And how do we do that? We work together with a number of different multi-sectoral stakeholders in the field of education, in the political sector, in the NGO sector, and try to come up with some of the solutions, deliver together joint solutions that really make a difference to the people. And I would like to give you 2 very concrete examples, also portraying what you have just been reflecting on. One example is an initiative that we launched about 1.5 years ago in Mexico, in Veracruz, where we work together with an entire community, including school students, but also different stakeholders from the political side, but also from the educational field, on climate change education, but also on fighting climate change. And it's amazing what came up with that initiative, really making a difference, specifically for the coastal lines, and delivering some of the key messages to the next generation, to the youth. You can really make a difference, and you can be part of this. So we are scaling this initiative now through a network that we have in Latin America. It's called the Red STEM Latin America Network, currently with over 200 partner institutions, and we are offering these programs in different locations throughout Latin America. I would also like to give another example, and this is going back to Kenya. We work specifically in sub-Saharan Africa a lot with young social entrepreneurs who really find key solutions in their local communities. So currently we are working on access to safe water, for example, in Kenya with our own social enterprise, We2 in Kisumu. We are also working on e-mobility solutions, and we are working on solar energy solutions, thereby really creating a difference for the communities and creating economic perspectives.
Thank you so much.
I would like to take a deep dive in that you mentioned Latin America, because we have a specialist of that region right here with us. Alicia, since the capacities of young people and the strengthening of it was one of the core foundings of our survey, we definitely have to think about how to also include marginalized groups, not only youth, into decision-making processes. And since your foundation, which you founded, is specialized on that, we would like to hear your perspective on that one.
Sure, thank you so much. Hi, everyone. Yeah, my name is Alicia, I'm from Brazil, and I work with Black and Indigenous young people across the continent, the region. I think I struggle a lot with the meaning behind meaningful, what meaningful actually means, because it will be different for each group that we're going to be working with. So I will talk about my program because I'm very proud of what we do. the focus of our program is to engage Black and Indigenous young people meaningfully into the climate negotiations at the UN level. And when we were thinking about what the dream would be for our program, the first thing that came through was language inclusion. So in Brazil, only 1% of the population is fluent in English. And within this 1%, I would say 95% are from very privileged backgrounds. So how are we going to include young people meaningfully if they do not understand what is being said in these international forums? So in our scholarship, we work with a team of professional interpreters. All of our capacity building sessions have interpretation for Spanish, Portuguese, and English. All of the experts that we bring into our sessions are from Latin America, and we give high priority for experts that are Black or Indigenous themselves, because they know best the solutions for their territories and for their communities. The first year that we did our scholarship, and this is a scholarship funded by 3 young people, so it's from me, Clara, she's German, and Ati Vivian, which is an Indigenous girl from Colombia. In the first year, we received 5,500 applications. 5,000, we left the application open for 2 weeks, and that shows the huge gap that we have in Latin America for programs that are fit to their needs. So we didn't ask any language requirements. We asked, what do you do in your community? Does your community support the work that you do? And what is your motivation to engage in the international level? And we tailored the whole program to their needs. So today we have 12 scholars from 8 different Latin American countries only this year that are following the climate negotiations. We're following the climate finance agenda and adaptation agenda and within the UNFCCC. And we have seen a huge difference on policy change. So now we have negotiators come to us with negotiation texts and say, hey, this is the language that we want to use on Indigenous people. Does this fit your needs? So I think when we talk about meaningful, we need to fully understand their needs. We need to give them ownership and not speak on their behalf. And for that, I think there's a long, long way to go in the climate movement. So I would say you share your resources, you open your doors, and then we go from there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alicia. Now, yeah. And finally, I would like to invite Achim to share his perspective. Achim, the survey identified greater integration in political decision-making processes that is a very important issue for engaging youth. In your experience, what role does the UN play in working toward this objective?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Perhaps I want to begin where Alicia just left off. I think sometimes you just have to open the door and see who walks through that door and give them the space and also the opportunity to shape a discussion. So let me also say, as one of the council members of this Hamburg Sustainability Conference, I want to thank you. I want to thank ONE also as a network for having embraced this opportunity. I think it's extremely important that HSC, whatever it may become over time, has from the beginning written into its DNA that space where you're not invited to comment, but rather you're invited to be heard and listened to. And I think from that point of view already, I've been listening with fascination to what you have said. I think you heard my colleague Cathy Russell already speak about some of the things that we observe around the world, so I don't want to add to that because you are all very familiar with including what is shown in this survey. I mean, to me, it's interesting that 50% of the responses are essentially about a feeling of exclusion, whether the doors are closed or whether there are other restrictions, cultural and so on. Very powerful, I think, message from the survey. Maybe if I can, in a sense, provoke the discussion a little bit, because there are also aspects of, I think, the way in which we think about engaging with young people needs to transcend the ritual. I mean, the United Nations is a very formalized, procedural organization. Some think it's pure bureaucracy, it's just process. No. If you want to bring 193 countries together, and you have China and the United States, but you also have Kiribati and maybe Lesotho and, a small country like Guatemala, or, all in one whole, it's quite difficult to actually discipline that unruly crowd. And, the fact of the matter is the General Assembly Hall, to this day, embodies a very fundamental principle, which is that every country has the right to be heard, and every country has the right to speak, and every country, however big or small, has the same number of seats in that General Assembly Hall. I use that image for a moment because We have been struggling in the United Nations with this phenomenon that we are an intergovernmental organization. There are still many governments who think that youth do not belong in the United Nations because it's governments who represent us. And we often have this debate that, you know, the charter starts with we the people. So who the hell is we the peoples? Now, the interesting thing is, I also think sometimes, notwithstanding the graph here, we underestimate how powerful young people are in today's world in organizing. I don't want to put Mercy on the spot, but I mean, Kenya in the last few months has shown fairly significantly how an entire population lines up behind a youth-led challenge to an established set of wisdoms. I was a few weeks ago in New York in the presence of somebody who I've known for decades and I admire very much, Mohammed Yunus. He is now the chief advisor of a country that essentially, through a youth-led movement, protest movement, overthrew a government. And let's also be clear, youth can organize today in this day and age in a way that was unthinkable just 10, 15 years ago. The access, increasing access to internet, broadband, and all the social networks gives it an extraordinary power. And one more image, and it has baffled and fascinated me from the beginning. A 14-year-old young girl one day sits outside the steps of her parliament with a handwritten poster, not a digital device, a handwritten poster, and basically says, I'm going on strike. You all know the story, Greta Thunberg. Now, we somehow, you know, then over-amplify the individual. I don't want to do that because, in fact, there are millions of Gretas out there. The question is, why did she have such an impact with that one gesture, which was essentially an expression of utter powerlessness, right, at that moment? And yet she triggered a movement that electrified youth across the world within 24 months. And I think we also need to study a bit more carefully that some of the rituals of engagement, just opening the doors, is actually just the first step. For us in UNDP, it's much more about understanding what is it that makes youth feel that they're actually able to co-create and shape things. And I want to remind us, sometimes the youth of a country, let's say in Europe, might have a very different preoccupation than that which both Alicia and Mercy spoke to just now when you think about young people in Africa. And a last example is, we are engaged with youth all over the African continent, including inspired sometimes by youth-led movements such as Youth Connect Africa, which is now the largest coming together. The last one was in Nairobi, but it began in Kigali, Rwanda. 10,000 young people coming together, and the president of Rwanda and the presidents of the countries in which we have these events literally being put in the middle of a, I wouldn't say boxing ring, but certainly when you're surrounded by 10,000 young people and you have to answer harsh questions about your politics and your policies, it's a different kind of conversation. I think we need to have the full spectrum on our radar. There are things that people don't like about the way things happen in society. That's a protest movement. There is another dimension of youth engagement, which is about livelihoods. Where am I going to earn? Where am I going to find my job? You spoke about unemployment. And that is just as legitimate a engagement that we seek as the development program of the United Nations. And there is a platform we are now developing called Timbuktu across the African continent, going into universities, establishing unipods where people, while they're at university, can already have access to latest technologies so they can take their ideas and begin to develop them. Because the minute they leave university, they have no facilities, no financing, because basically the financial system will not support people at their most entrepreneurial stage. That's all part of it. And the last contradiction that I struggle with sometimes, just because you're young doesn't mean you're right. And why do I say that? Because I worry sometimes right now, in a country such as this, there are a lot of young people here that if you gave them today a voice in this meeting, you would be shocked by what they actually believe, think, or advocate for. And this is another tension we have to deal with when it comes to an organization like the United Nations. Who represents whom at a particular moment?
So much.
Yeah, we are actually fighting the clock. I'm sorry. We are going to discuss it later even more. Well, we only have 4 minutes left, and so we have to cut it short here with our solutions, but findings, I'm sorry, or results. We warmly invite you to take a look online. It's a 30-page document, but just to round it up here, we would
also find the QR code in the last slide of the presentation, so you can download it and read it. It's very interesting, and like the results are really inspiring,
for policy leaders. Yeah, Exactly. Just two quick insights. We are thinking about young people want to be active participants, not bystanders. And we are hoping for a more meaningful inclusion in the entire process. And raising civic awareness through education is the foundation. I really have to cut
Thank you so
cut to
much.
the chase
I
here.
really want to make a second round of questions. So maybe very, very quick. We will start now with Bärbel Kofler. Really just 30-second bro speaker to share your perspective. Yeah.
Well, 30 seconds is a challenge.
Yep.
I give you one example where I think it's so important to have young people. We had a strategic outreach in our ministry in changing our attitude towards our African partner countries. And what we did is we were counseling with our youth advisor, and they did an outreach to have a really meaningful discussion with their counterparts in the Global South and various African countries. And their insights were basically surprising for both of us, because there were results and there were topics mentioned by young representatives from other countries, which also our young people didn't think about. And I think that is something important. If we are inclusive, we shouldn't be inclusive only to a certain layer of people or to a certain continent or whatever. We should be really inclusive and include those people, I think Alicia was saying, that who represent themselves best. And that's something I learned in a lot of discussions.
So I will address that second question to both of you. Which recommends or which demands do you have to policy maker here in the room but beyond? Really 30 seconds for everyone.
So from the results of the barriers towards participation, so active solutions that even in my own country and in my own journey, having participated in politics, policy, and then of course civic engagement. Number one, there is need of having a youth space on its own. For example, the youth consultations. So an example of the United Nations Environmental Assembly in Nairobi, we were able to have the youth assembly before the actual UNIA itself, and then we are able to write a youth declaration. So having youth together and creating a space that is just for them, youth-led, that's a beginning point. However, the next level is meaningful engagement, where now you're able to have intergenerational dialogues, you're able to have youth with seats at the actual table. It should not be a side youth table. They need a side table because then they need to brainstorm together. Because the only way you'll be able to include all youth, because even among the youth, there's elites and then those who are on the ground.
Yeah.
So
Alicia,
have
really
youth at the
20
table.
seconds, and when we will have to give some time for the other speakers.
Sure. I would say for the young people in the room, don't actually wait for the ones that are younger for longer to make change. If I were waiting, I would be waiting up until today. So just do your own thing. And for the people that are younger for longer, fund us. We cannot do our work alone. And something that I always say is act as if the world is ending, because for many people it is. So if we want to change it, let's do it right now.
Thank you so much. After
Achim, your quick remarks. You see quite short.
I will yield my time, please.
Thank you.
Yeah, Nina, the floor is yours.
I make it 3 seconds. I think access to education, connectivity, and skills, including digital skills. Secondly, access to impact finance to really make difference for local initiatives. And thirdly, active participation and co-creation of meaningful networks.
Thank you so much. And these also are the recommendations from the youth that we collected, the reviews that we collected in our recommendations. So it will be really, really helpful for us. And we will be very grateful to you can scan the code, the QR code.
And we would like to invite the entire co-creation team on the stage, please. And a round of applause, please.